Hello everyone, and thank you for being here with us today. It's great to see so many of you in the room. I know we had a few things to contend with amongst train strikes. I was told this morning there's apparently some teacher strikes going on as well. So thank you for coming. Oh, and not to mention another digital conference which is going on the other side of London as well. So lovely to have you. And we have a really exciting lineup of content for you today. So just to begin by introducing your speakers. So myself, my name is Sophie Marlowe, and I'm a senior client partner here at Pinterest on our retail division. Shortly, I'm going to be joined by Rebecca Rangeley, who is our head of UK measurement, and whom I'm sure many of you in the room will also be familiar with. And then last, but certainly not least, the wonderful Jen McGrath, who is our client account manager, and for whom I'm sure many of you will have also been introduced. So in terms of the agenda and what we have planned for you today, I'm going to be taking you through a little bit of background as to Pinterest and what makes us different here. And that's going to be really important for setting the scene when it comes to measurement, deciding your attribution window and activating for success. Jen is then going to be speaking to you about what's upcoming in the future of digital advertising and how that is going to affect your measurement strategy. Finally, Becky will be taking you through some points for how you can start thinking about measuring successfully in this new digital landscape when we have third-party cookie deprecation on the horizon and other kind of changing factors and changing variables. Finally, we will have a panel Q&A where we're going to be joined by Media Hub's Irfan Dejazmi, Chief Digital Officer, Pinterest Laura Thomas, our Head of Home Matt Saibury, and Jamie Bolton, VP of Growth at Fosber Marketing. So before we get into all of that, let's start off with a bit of context to set the scene. So it's different here. If you're familiar with Pinterest at all, you'll know that this is something that we often say. And that is because we really sit in this very unique position of personalised discovery. And when you come to Pinterest, it's not about seeing what other people are up to and following celebrities, following your friends. You're also not there to get your news content, or if you know exactly what the product is that you're searching for that you want to buy. When people are coming to Pinterest, it's because they want to be inspired and they're looking for new ideas, but they don't know exactly what. And we really are the positive corner of the internet, a personal oasis where you can come to spend time planning for your own future. And so it's no surprise that our mission statement is to bring everyone the inspiration to create a life that they love. And research actually suggests that we're doing a pretty good job of that. So as you can see, Pinterest ranks #1 in inspiration, and this is on no small scale. Nielsen surveyed social media platforms across EMEA, Australia, Brazil, Canada, and the US, and found that Pinterest was the #1 most inspiring platform. It's also relevant here. On Pinterest, people are coming to look for ideas. As we mentioned previously, they're not coming to see what their friends are up to or get their news content. So in that context, ideas and products from brands are actually inspiring and they're actually additive to the experience. So that's really unusual to know that your brand showing up is going to be welcomed by consumers and it's not going to be interruptive. Furthermore, contextual relevancy is something that we speak about a lot in our industry. On Pinterest, we have the benefit of a signed-in user base, which is of course great from a targeting perspective. However, that's not what makes us unique. What does make us unique is in coupling this with a contextually relevant environment. When people are coming to Pinterest, you can be the solution at the exact moment that they're looking for something. It's not that they've viewed that product previously or at another time and are being retargeted. They're actually searching for the answer right now. And it's also open-minded here. Because people are coming to discover something new, they don't necessarily come with a brand in mind. Take the example of wanting to buy a birthday gift for a friend. If you knew exactly what you wanted to get them, you could go straight to social media and straight to search. And at that point, you're searching for a product and the deciding factor is probably going to be a cost variable or maybe some other factors like delivery, for example. But on Pinterest, you can get in front of that customer before they know what it is that they want to buy. And that is one reason why having an always-on brand presence is so valuable. We're also really proud to say that it's very safe on Pinterest, and that hasn't happened by accident. We've actually taken tangible steps to ensure that Pinterest is a safe and welcoming space for everyone. Not to mention our creator code, which is a standard of behaviour that all creators that come to our platform pledge to adhere to protect everyone who's using Pinterest. We've also recently introduced new policies around teen safety, such as no filters, so that teens are coming and seeing realistic images in their own likeness, and no consent without contact. So with all of this in mind, it's really no surprise that 8 in 10 people say that they come to Pinterest to feel positive. And earlier this year, we conducted some brand new research with Berkeley University, where we found that just 10 minutes per day of browsing on Pinterest for Gen Z students whilst they were in the most stressful period of their lives, studying for their final exams, actually encouraged positive emotions and increased capacity for emotional well-being. So this guarded particularly against symptoms such as stress, burnout, and social disconnection. And it's also incremental. So we have 450 million people coming to our platform every month, and a good deal of those you won't find elsewhere. So as you can see, a significant lack of overlap between ourselves, Twitter, TikTok, and Snapchat of around 50%, and also 17 to 30% on Instagram. So really the main takeaway here being that if you're not on Pinterest, then you're missing out on this unique audience. And for this audience, the future is planned on Pinterest. They're coming for new ideas and to plan for the future. On Pinterest, we aren't looking to keep people scrolling mindlessly on the platform with addictive algorithms. We actually want to give them the tools to take something from our platform and go and enact it in their real life. So that's a little bit about what makes us unique. Now I will talk to you about what that looks like from the perspective of the customer journey and user engagement. So the first thing to take into account is that people are coming to the platform to plan for a moment before it's happened. So take the example of going to a festival, for instance. I'm sure there may be some of you in the crowd who are recent Glastonbury goers, and maybe you even came to Pinterest to plan your outfit or to look for a packing checklist. One thing that I'm sure you probably did do is to post about it on social media while you were there. And if you didn't post while you were in the moment, then you may have posted afterwards when you got home. But what is so valuable is the mindset of future planning for Pinterest and how you can influence that moment in their lives. Because in the right context, your brand can be the solution. So as we saw previously, 97% of searches on Pinterest are unbranded. So that's really valuable if you're looking to create a new brand preference with an out-of-market audience and to reach new customers. Because Pinterest actually drives 10 times higher branded search off-platform. So what that tells us is, although pinners are coming to the platform without a brand in mind, they are actually leaving with a brand in mind. And so that is why having a full funnel and particularly upper funnel strategy is really important, because naturally there would be no branded search without a pre-formed brand preference. So take Kim, our typical pinner, and her path to purchase as an example. Kim comes to Pinterest browsing for summer fashion. She begins from left to right by coming onto the home feed and looking for taste-based curated discovery content. She then moves through the path to purchase to the deciding phase, whereby she can save ideas to her boards to come back and compare and contrast afterwards, before moving to the final stage of purchase on one of our shopping surfaces. The important thing to note here is that this journey is, of course, interspersed with offline activity as well. Kim is naturally going to leave the platform, go on to other search engines or other channels, and also be met with advertising in other areas as well. But ultimately, what really stands out here is the full funnel nature of our platform and the fact that you can meet pinners at those various touch points along the path to purchase, and really should be present when doing so. So to contextualize this with some data, take the example of a typical path to purchase time period on Pinterest. So this is for our fashion vertical. And as you can see, this can take anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks, depending on maybe factors such as price and the type of item, from that initial moment of discovery, that first touch point, through the decision-making phase and the final act of purchasing. And this is very recent data from our Path to Purchase study from March last year. Consider how this changes when it comes to the home vertical. So as you might imagine, these are typically going to be bigger types of purchases, maybe more permanent long-term types of purchases. And so we can really see that reflected in the data up to sort of 3 to 4 weeks out from the act of purchasing. And this is of course on average, so bear in mind some journeys may be longer or shorter, through to the act of finally purchasing in the end. So the important point here is to make sure that you're choosing the right attribution window based on your vertical and your products. Because if you're not seeing the full picture, then you're missing out on conversions and performance that your campaign is driving. So that's a little bit about what the user engagement and the customer journey is like. How can you actually take that information and activate now for success on our platform? So as we saw with Kim's journey, customer journeys are greatly non-linear. Users change apps, channels, devices, and even browsers over the time from which they first interact with your ad. And that, of course, means that it's harder to track, and also journeys may take longer than we think and than we see. Secondly, the thing to think about is how advertising actually works. And it rarely works through rapidly changing and shifting behaviour in a short time. More often, it is through salience and memory rather than persuasion. It nudges and forms preferences over time. And so the important thing to think about here is ensuring that you're present over those multiple touch points and along a wide enough time period. Think of yourself and the last time that you saw an ad, clicked and immediately purchased it, versus when you bought a product because you were familiar with the brand, maybe you'd purchased from them before, and you've interacted with them and seen that ad in multiple different environments. Another really important thing to remember is that 95% of your audience are not in market for your products. They're not ready or in the mood to buy a piece of clothing, an ice cream, a car, or a mobile phone at any one point in time. And what marketing science actually tells us is that when consumers come in market, they usually already have 2 to 4 brands in mind. So if your brand isn't one of those, then you've sort of already lost. And so when your consumer does come in market, you need to make sure that they have your brand top of mind. And that is the most important and main incrementality driver of your marketing efforts. At that point, the sales activation becomes very important to win the sprint against your competitor, because otherwise you've basically created a new customer for your competitor. But because of the way that marketing performance and algorithms work, most of the time you're almost exclusively going after that 5% in-market audience because of their high intent signals, such as, has this user visited my website? Have they searched for a product? And that means that you're not going to be the only one chasing them, and therefore that audience is really expensive and hard to reach. So having a holistic strategy and reaching 100% of your audience, including that undecided out of market audience, is so important. And naturally, you'll also be reaching them at a lower cost because there is less competition. So the good news is that you can plan a holistic strategy on Pinterest and align that mindset, that pinner mindset that we saw in Kim's example, to the purchase funnel. And that means that you're creating content for every stage of the journey and ensuring that brand and sales activation work together so that pinners encounter your campaign from discover to decision right the way through to do. And we have a variety of formats which are designed to meet each of these objectives. One thing to bear in mind is that if you are trying to reach an out-of-market audience and make your brand top of mind when they come in market, is that you need to stand out. And one way of doing that is to test multiple new formats and see what is working for your brand. And we really see this evidenced in the data as well. The effect of running multi-objective campaigns is really clear. So this was a comprehensive study of 45 advertisers across 5 different markets. We compared strategies where one campaign objective, i.e. Sales, conversion, was compared against a multi-objective strategy where branding and sales were working together. And we actually found an incremental uplift of 57%. Which is really dramatic and I think very much speaks to the effectiveness of combining upper and lower funnel. So to conclude this section, there are 3 established and central incrementality drivers that you can be thinking about when you're activating for success on Pinterest and in your wider media plans as well. So firstly, branding and sales don't operate independently of one another. They work together and they amplify each other. Secondly, building on how advertising works, you need to get noticed because it's about memory and salience and building recognition over time. Make your ads memorable, not just clickable, and remember to test new formats as well. If you're sticking to the same thing, then you're not going to see different and new results. And finally, remember that 95% of your audience aren't in market. So you need to be continuously and at minimal cost reaching all buyers. There's a misconception that businesses grow by getting more out of existing customers, but the problem with that logic is that most customers aren't loyal. They change brands all the time, and so you need to be reaching and converting light buyers with an always-on brand strategy. Cost-wise, if you stretch your budgets over a longer time period, you'll also be more efficient as well. So that's everything from me, and I'll now pass you over to Jen for a look at what's next for digital advertising and how you can prepare.
Amazing, thank you, Sophie. So I'm just going to spend the next few minutes talking about how advertisers can navigate in a post-cookie world. We're all aware of the depreciation of cookies, and we know how hard it is being an advertiser in this current climate. Not only do we have those macroeconomic headwinds, but we're also dealing with heightened consumer expectations and these upcoming privacy changes. The main headline here is that Google is following in Apple's lead and will be depreciating those third-party identifiers. The reason that this is so significant is because in the UK, Chrome is the most used browser with 50% of the share compared to Safari's at just 32%. So when we talk about a world without cookies, what do we actually mean and how does this directly affect our marketing activity? Well, firstly, more consent is going to be needed from people. Now people can choose to either opt in or out of cookies. And this could mean that we have a smaller audience pool that relies on off-site signals. Secondly, fewer cookies means that we have fewer levers available in our optimization models. And then thirdly, fewer signals can lead to incomplete results when we're looking at both measurement and reporting. Let's think back to earlier when Sophie took you through Kim's path to purchase and look at why the loss of cookies is so significant in this example. So when we look at Kim's journey, you can see that without third-party cookies, there is no way for us to identify everything that's happening here, both offline and online. We simply can't connect the dots. So we can't tie Kim going onto Pinterest, pinning her summer outfit, coming for ideas, to then going off onto different sites, doing her research online, to then going to actually convert and buying that outfit that she's been dreaming of. And all of these events that are coming from those different corners of the internet are completely unrelated without these third-party identifiers. So the immense scale and volume of data that we can collect through these third-party identifiers and thread them all together is the big part of what makes our digital advertising so effective at not only reaching the right audience, but delivering ROAS for your media spend. I want to talk about a couple of hard facts here that really contextualize the environment that we're facing. And they come from new research conducted by Accenture. And after talking to 1,000 decision makers in the advertising industry, a couple of key macro themes emerged. Firstly, around half of advertisers surveyed have already seen those privacy changes that I just talked about negatively impact their campaigns. And with more changes on the horizon, all of the advertisers surveyed virtually acknowledged awareness of them, but actually only 8% of them said they understand what these changes mean, which is a huge gap. And a lot of these changes going on have essentially resulted in stagnation. So much so that 45% of the marketers surveyed said that they've been using the exact same approach in advertising for the last 5 years. And almost 3/4 of them still don't have a clear plan for these upcoming changes. So when you look at these findings and all the information in front of us, you get a real sense of the opportunity here. There's a lot of confusion as advertisers are looking for solutions not only in the short term, but in the long term, and they want something that they can adapt to face all of these industry changes coming. What's really important with these changes is that you need to make sure that you're seeing everything, because we can't measure what we can't see. The Accenture survey found that 50% of advertisers don't have the data that they need to actually make more holistic attribution views. And it's so important now, more than ever, to combine the right targeting strategy with the right measurement approach. With the loss of these third-party cookies, many of these legacy analytic approaches will simply no longer work. We need to get ahead of this by filling the data gaps that we have, both today's and tomorrow's, to increase your review of events and conversions that we can then attribute to your media spend. And I'm going to pass over to Becky now, who's going to take you through how we actually measure success in a cookieless world.
Thank you so much, Jen. So in this world of data loss, how do you then measure for success? And this is the journey that myself and Jen will continue to take you on through the rest of the presentation. And you've already seen the full funnel capabilities of Pinterest. At every stage of the customer journey, we have a part to play, as demonstrated by Sophie and Jen already. We take pinners from inspiration to decision. And that calls for full funnel measurement solutions. And we offer all of those, from awareness to consideration to conversion and sales. But tapping back into the Accenture research that Jen just taken you through, 65% of advertising decision makers surveyed in the Accenture research still base their attribution on last click to optimize ongoing campaigns. And this is in 2023. And we understand why, because it's scalable, available, and at best, it's the apples to apples approach. But most advertisers, and some of you in the room will already know, that this source of truth is not perfect. And at the end of the day, as you've just heard from Jen, this solution won't be viable in the long term. And it's an extremely limited view to your media value and what it's truly driving. But we do recognize overall, it's not easy. It's a huge challenge. And as a measurement team, that's what we're here to do, to help you take that first step towards improving your measurement source of truth. But first, let's just level set on why last touch attribution is not the best source of truth. So what I would like to do is talk about how not to measure for effectiveness. So issue one, using one single source of truth and focusing on one single source of truth is extremely limiting. It's not possible to measure all of your marketing activities through one single lens. Issue two is that single measure is typically built on attribution and one golden metric, ROAS. Now, I'm a massive fan of James Clear, Atomic Habits. I've just absorbed that book and I've bought all the workbooks. And to parrot James, if you're only measuring one metric, you're getting a very narrow view of the world. We optimize to what we measure. And if we choose the wrong measure, then we get the wrong behavior. That means if you only pick one metric, optimizing on attribution, for example, you're going to place every pound where it gets the best price for the most clicks that results in the best conversion. And you'll only ever optimize towards that at the expense of everything else. So if you think about, for example, calorie counting to lose weight, you're then reducing, so you're ignoring everything like nutritional value of food if you reduce all of your calories. So there's externalities to only focusing on that one measure. Then there's significant conceptual challenges and technical challenges with attribution, which make it unsuitable for measuring the effectiveness of advertising. On its own, it faces these challenges. Challenge one, attribution claims are based on arbitrary rules or correlation and not causation. Challenge two, it inherently places a high weight on recency. Challenge three, the attribution's data source is limited to clicks. And challenge four, third-party attribution, it's nearly impossible, as you've heard Jen talk through on Kim's journey, to deduplicate fragmented cross-browser conversion paths. So what I'm going to do now is take a closer look at these challenges to understand their impact. First off, Avinash Kushak recently wrote, "Attribution is not incrementality." And this may sound really simple, but it's hugely important to remember this and the difference between them. Attribution fails to uncover the causal effect between advertising and additional incremental sales. It's not uncovering the effect between advertising. Every marketer knows that there are other important factors like product, word of mouth, customer service. And what attribution does is actually allocate 100 purchases, for example, will be claimed by marketing. All 100 conversion paths will be distributed to the media channels that you observe during that advertising period, and it won't take into account how many of those conversions may have happened anyway. Whereas incrementality comes into play here, whereas it starts to understand how many of those conversions would have never happened without advertising. And in my example, I've just picked an arbitrary number of 23. And by having this insight, this actually helps you allocate existing budget more effectively. That will then in turn help grow your business and hopefully for you grow your budgets for more marketing. And let's really drive home that issue. Think back to the in-market audience that Sophie spoke about. If you were to then use retargeting to target that 5%, isn't it really strange that retargeting is showing up really well in attribution, but actually it's the worst tactic for incrementality. It's not driving incremental. So what I would like to do now is, I'm really hoping this works because I just set myself up for a fail. But hands up if any of you recall seeing an ad today, anywhere, on your phone, on the way in, on a bus, on a billboard, anywhere. Okay, so good for you if you recall. So that's my, keep your hands up. Actually, it's not quite 100%. Oh no, almost right. Okay, how many of you actually remember, keep your hand up if you recall the exact brand? Okay, well, okay, so this is my brand recall. How many of you actually then acted upon the ad there and then? None of you. Because we're all busy, right? You don't have time, you're on your way to a conference, you're trying to do something, you lose your Wi-Fi network, but it's cemented in your mind, right? Now put your hands up if you may act later. Something's set in your mind, you've seen something, you want to do it. Come on, advertising does work. Somebody put your hands up. But this demonstrates my point exactly. You know, substantially, well, higher percentage of you do recall it, you didn't act. Okay, so this helps me for my level set. If you don't look at post impressions and what's happening after that exposure, you're going to misattribute channels and impact. You were exposed to advertising today, but that wouldn't be picked up in a straight line attribution model. Because attribution places that high weight on recency. And empirical evidence shows that that is not a driver of incremental sales. Typically, the closer an ad is to the point of purchase, as Peter Buckley of Meta says, it's less likely that the attributed sales are incremental. His incrementality slope here visualizes this contrast nicely. Not only is attribution not providing any answer to which conversions are incremental, driven by advertising, it's biased to give attribution credit for conversions that are unlikely to be incremental. And as you heard from Sophie, the journey from discovery to do takes time, and you'd miss all the other touch points that had a part to play and demonstrated just by yourselves this morning and the exposure. So for example, that fashion purchase for Glasso is happening much earlier than that last click. Last click is only rule is to look for the touch point with the shortest time between the touch point and the conversion event. And data-driven models like the ones from site-side analytics, such as Google Analytics, use this dimension as an important variable for their modeling. And I'm going to come on to more on the weaknesses of modeling later on. But first off, we're going to quote here like Byron Sharp, How Brands Grow. The dominant way that advertising works is by refreshing and occasionally building memory structures, and memories that link between an ad and brand choice. And you heard Sophie speak to this earlier, that brand saliency. To influence behavior, advertising must work with people's memories. So why then do we use clicks as the single source of data in attribution then? And the honest answer is because clicks represent the only available user-level touchpoint that links an ad to a conversion. That's why it's used. But third-party attribution is not able to consider non-click conversion paths. And just think back to our test again. you didn't act, but that doesn't mean that advertising didn't work from you. Two of you did put your hand up to say that you'll act on it later, but some of you recall the brand, and that's set in mind, and that's brand building, brand awareness, and it just means that you have to optimize for the exposure instead of that interaction. And that's exactly why relying on clicks as the only data input is going to set you up for a fail. And at Pinterest, we know that clicks are a tiny fraction of all of our media touchpoints. In fact, 95% of our attributed conversions are not click-based. And this then vastly misrepresents the true effectiveness of advertising, and particularly advertising on Pinterest, because a small amount of interactions are captured from a really high intent audience. So what are we really highlighting here? Well, really the difference in value between clicks and impressions. And there's no denying that clicks are important, and arbitrary number 10 times more effective than impressions. The average time spent is higher, the intent is higher, but how many impressions can you buy instead of one click? Is one click superior to 1,000 impressions? It'll all come down to cost and reach. And in the words of John Mew, the CEO of IAB, and I think when he said this, I was pregnant with either my first or second, so one is 7 years old now and the other is now almost 9. He said, don't rely on the most easily accessible options. Whatever metrics you choose, just remember, don't be a clickhead. And that was, as I said, 7 to 9 years ago, and it's just as relevant today as it was back then. But, this isn't just happening on our own data. You'll hear from Jamie from Foster later. He's on our panel. Their data is also showcasing that social media is underreporting in this concept by 74%, and even worse in the case of 90% in the case of Pinterest. So when you look at site side analytics, it's underreporting sales. For Pinterest, 1/10 of sales are recognized by Google Analytics, which is crazy. And this report was not commissioned by us, by the way. That's their independent State of E-commerce report. But so, and the final point is about more about data modeling, right? So it's essential to note that data-driven attribution suffers from the same weaknesses as rule-based attribution. So adding algorithms in the mix doesn't solve for the weaknesses. Why? Because actually you're only basing it on a tiny fraction of ad exposures for the data input. So it's not actually reflecting how advertising works. Attribution modeling is only as good as the data that goes in. So if your input is poor, the data out is going to be poor. So what's the point? We'd almost rather you straight-lined a basic linear model off 100% of the data versus the really sophisticated model that bases it off the 5%. And even when just considering click touchpoints, third-party attribution still fails to get representation of click conversion paths because of the fragmentation across browsers we've spoken about, and an even smaller bias data inputting. It leaves an even smaller amount of data input for its modeling. But even Google recognized this themselves. Okay, I can hear you say, GA4 is coming. They're now starting to do data-driven attribution. So now they'll also do a multi-touch attribution by design. It's not going to be default. It's still going to default to last clicks. You have to change that. But it will give credit to higher funnel publishers and media, but it will still be dependent on cookies for tracking. So some of the journeys captured in Google are still going to be significantly shorter than when the modeling approach was conceived. So to summarize this section, if the data you are putting in the first place is bad, the results will remain poor too. So just really to recapture, site analytics, last click attribution does not account for 3 key areas of attribution and ultimately under attributes social media and Pinterest because 1, it doesn't recognize pinners who didn't check out in the same session. It doesn't recognize pinners who buy from a different device or browser, and it doesn't recognize pinners who buy after viewing the ad without clicking. So the key thing to note here is that this is about viewing the whole mountain range and not just these peaks and troughs. And when it comes to evaluating the impact of your full funnel omnichannel media strategy, having a suite of solutions is going to broaden the scope of your measurement, increase uncertainty in decision making. Relying on one sole metric for measurement is limiting. So this drives the need to start looking at solutions more holistically. So how you actually now measure for effectiveness. You need to create a measurement system of truth rather than one sole metric. And a measurement system of truth should include, but isn't limited to, improving and future-proofing on-platform conversion visibility, which we'll talk to a lot about later in the second session, establishing a full funnel framework based on media metrics and KPIs as proven proxies for marketing effectiveness, calibrating your third-party attribution through reattribution, and lastly, running incrementality studies to measure both the incremental effect on brand equity and on sales. And this is an iterative test and learn process. Best-in-class measurement advertisers use these types of systems simultaneously to calibrate results against each other. But, this is a journey. It takes time and it's not easy, as I recognized at the beginning. This is a huge challenge. You need to start by walking. Like exercise, you can't attain that dream physique overnight. Each advertiser's journey is also extremely different, and you may be at different points on here. You might be able to pinpoint where you are, but it's about evolving from a single source of truth to a system of truth, and measurement are here to help you through that journey. Starting with the basics, there's a focus on last touch attribution. And then the business intelligence phase is where advertisers talk to, for example, the measurement team and your account managers and partner managers to create that strategy around measurement and investing in resourcing. Evolving that focus onto incrementality, advertisers increase their level of sophistication to see longer term value on above the line media, as well as value in advanced measurement like MTA, MMM, which again we will talk on later. And then finally, scaled marketing and measurement is where there's synergy, that holy grail between marketing and measurement with long-term data strategy and data-driven decision making. So it's moving from this short-term to longer-term measurement and review, test, learn, and iterate approach. To close out, I'll leave you with something to discuss in the break and some more James Clear. Habits are great and they create a foundation for you to become a master of your art. However, habits can come at a cost. As a habit becomes automatic, you become less sensitive to feedback and you fall into mindless repetition. When you can do something good enough, like brushing your teeth, I think is example, you stop thinking how to do it better. The upside is that we do things without thinking. The downside is that you actually get used to doing things a certain way and you stop paying attention. Now I can hear you say, how on earth does this relate to measurement? The point is you must establish a system for reflection and review so you don't fall into that complacency. You need to maintain awareness of your performance over time so you can constantly find ways to improve. And the crux of establishing a measurement system of truth is just that. Move from one metric, which becomes easy to measure and achievable, to establishing a system of truth and ways to calibrate. So as we come back after the break, we're going to talk about 4 really clear steps, no pun there actually, James Clear steps, it was not intentional, we can make to break those habits and evolve your system of truth. So what we'll do is go to break now. A Wi-Fi network, everyone needs to be on the Wi-Fi network because there is going to be a little quiz when we come back that's going to be better than my hands up quiz. And we're just going to go to break in the Indigo room and we'll see you 20 minutes. Yeah, see you again in 20 minutes. Thank you so much for listening.
Hi everybody, welcome back. For the next part of the section, we just need everybody to open the camera, scan the QR code, and it'll bring up Slido. And then once everyone has that done, you can just let me know and we'll move on to some Q&A. Are we all good? Okay. Before we get started, this is not moderated in the sense that I can't block out certain words, anything, bold. So let's keep it PG-13, if that's okay. Okay. How prepared do you feel for measurement in a post-cookie world? So we have a couple of options. You feel very prepared, somewhat prepared, or I have no clue what's going on and that's why I'm here, prepared. Okay, amazing. Okay. Bit of a mixed bag. Some more prepared is good. I feel like that's how a lot of people in the marketing and advertising industry feel about a post-cookie world. We know bits, but we don't know all of it. So hopefully after today, this chart will be more very prepared versus somewhat prepared. Okay. Has your source of truth changed in the last 5 years? And this relates back to that Accenture piece of research where some marketers are saying that it hasn't changed at all in the past 5 years. Okay. Again, mixed bag. Okay, interesting. Okay. How many sources of truth are you using? So are you just looking at GA as a last click model, or have you developed that measurement roadmap around what Becky was talking about, having a system of truth rather than one source? 2, okay. Does anybody want to shout out what they're using? Is it GA and then something in addition? If anyone wants to just share with the audience? No.
GA and then like an econometric model of some description.
Thank you. Audience participation is hard. Okay, amazing. What proportion of you or your clients that you work on are using last click? And I imagine this will be very skewed towards one way. Yeah, I had a feeling it would be the majority of clients, if not all.
Do you mean last click is the only source of truth that's
Yeah, or just in general using it. So like if you have one source of truth, is it GA? But if you're using, say, 2 or 3 sources, is GA included within that source? So yeah, the majority, yeah. Okay, perfect. And then finally, this is more of an open-ended question. So again, let's keep PG. If your clients are using a last click attribution model, why is this? So for example, is it easy to use? Is it just the default at the moment? Clients don't, it's the devil we know, very true. Like it is, it's just very familiar to a lot of advertising, both agencies and clients. Yeah, the default, easiest. Yeah, short-sighted. Easy measurement across social platforms. That is something that we get an awful lot. Ignorance. Okay. Okay, interesting. Thank you for all of this. We're going to take this data and we're going to use it in just to help us when we go to clients to talk about some of the challenges, how we can also offer a couple of other solutions around measurement to really help evolve your clients or your measurement system of truth. Okay, perfect. Thank you for participating and keeping it all good. We're going to switch back just to the main topic where I'm going to take you through, myself and Becky are going to take you through the next section. But first, a little video just to get us back in the Pinterest mood. Okay, perfect. So for this next section, Becky and I are going to walk you through how you can evolve your measurement, starting with a 4-step approach. So the first step in your journey is all about increasing your conversion visibility. And when we talk about conversion visibility, we're talking about things like, is your tag set up? Is it healthy, more importantly? Has it got any errors showing? Or if you're further down in the journey, have you got the API for conversion set up? The second step in involving your measurement is identifying the gaps between your web analytics tool, so again, if it's GA or a different source, and the Pinterest Ads Manager. The third step is then looking at the path to purchase and the role that Pinterest can play within that journey in terms of influencing your target audience to make a purchase. And then finally, incrementality testing using a Pinterest conversion lift tool to really show the full impact that Pinterest can play in the journey. And as Becky said earlier, measurement really is a journey and we need to walk before we can run. We don't want to be down here at step 4 talking about incrementality testing when we don't even have the first step set up and we don't even have a tag in Ads Manager. So the next few slides are just really focused on how you can increase your conversion visibility and make the most of the tools that Pinterest has available to you. Okay, so let's start with increasing your conversion visibility. So the process of evolving your measurement starts with implementing solutions that really set up and help improve that conversion visibility. And again, as I said, it all starts with the tag. While the first party tag is the most basic tool at disposal for platforms to track conversions, understanding the importance of both first party and third party tags is immensely important. And on the path to conversion visibility, implementing both a healthy tag and the API for conversions is your foundations for having accurate data passback. I'm sure you have all heard about other APIs in a cookieless world, and not only from us here at Pinterest, but also from other digital platforms, and there is a really good reason for this. The API is essentially used to send web, in-app and offline conversions directly into Pinterest in real time or in a batch. And with the API and implementing that, you're future-proofing your conversion visibility to be set up independent of all of these cookies changes that we just talked about. And one of the most important things with the API is you're making results from conversion lift studies way more realistic in terms of showing incremental ROAS to your advertisers or to your own marketing activity. And I want to talk about a really great example of a brand who implemented the API for conversions. And I'm going to try really hard not to butcher the name, because in Ireland, we're not taught languages. We can't even speak our own properly. So the API for conversions was implemented by Cavade, the second largest luxury department store in Europe. And when they implemented the API, they saw a 133% lift in attributed Pinterest checkout conversions. And they also saw their checkout CPA decrease by 57%. And I think we can all agree that the results that we're seeing on screen are like absolutely phenomenal results. So not only are they seeing more conversions coming in with the API, they're also seeing their media costs come down significantly in terms of that checkout CPA. And as we said all along, measurement is a journey. So if you're at the beginning of the journey and the implementation of the API is way further down, there still are options for us to plug those gaps. You can upload your conversion data straight into Ads Manager, and then Pinterest has the ability to match those conversions directly to the campaigns that you have run in Ads Manager. We also have another solution where advertisers can upload their conversions to a third party. So for example, here with LiveRamp. LiveRamp can then match those conversions to Pinterest IDs, and then Pinterest can match those conversions to campaigns running in Ads Manager. So very similar to what I just spoke about with the Ads Manager upload, but with the third party of LiveRamp involved. Okay, great. So now we know how to increase your conversion visibility. The next step on the journey is to really identify the gaps in your measurement roadmap. And so here at Pinterest, we have a range of solutions using both first party and third party data to really help brands understand what those gaps look like. But first, before we get into that, I want to talk quickly about the importance of having the right attribution window for your campaigns. Understanding how long it takes for consumers to convert after being exposed to an ad is a fundamental part of the consumer journey. So for example, we heard Sophie talk earlier about how the fashion vertical takes about 2 to 3 weeks to convert after seeing an ad. And as Sophie said earlier again, Pinterest is a visual discovery platform. So we know that 92% of the conversions we track are view-based, and 83% of bidders admitted to making a purchase based on a brand that they saw on Pinterest. Having the right attribution window and understanding the value of a view is critical within your measurement journey. So when it comes to attribution at Pinterest, I want you to think of a waterfall. Pinterest reports on attributions for 3 key actions, and the first being the most important, starting at the top of that waterfall, being a click. Then we have engagement being the secondary, and then finally a view. So what this essentially means is when we're looking at attribution in Pinterest, we only count one conversion once. So we're giving credit to the strongest action. So starting at the top of the waterfall, if there was a click, yes, okay, that becomes a click conversion. Okay, if we serve the ad, there was no click, but they engaged with the ad, it then becomes an engagement conversion. And then finally at the bottom of the waterfall, if there was no click, no engagement, but they viewed the ad and went on to convert off the back of that, it becomes a view conversion. Here's an example of an advertiser looking at a window of 771. So 7 days for the click, 7 days for the engagement, and 1 day for the view. This is a report that we can pull within Pinterest. And what this essentially does is break down all of the activity for this particular brand against all the attribution windows that we have available. So let's just think back to the example of for the fashion vertical, where it's taking on average 2 to 3 weeks for somebody to make a purchase after being exposed to the ad. So you can see here on this example that if this advertiser is looking at a 771 in fashion, but we know it's taking 2 to 3 weeks, our recommendation then would be increase that attribution window to a 30-30-30, because you can see here that Pinterest is being massively undervalued on that 771 because we're not getting the full picture of all the conversions taking place. As I've said, we have a suite of tools that can fall under helping you evolve your measurement journey, and one of them is the Pinterest conversion analysis. And within Pinterest conversion analysis, there are a whole list of tools that we have. I won't go into all of them at the moment because I could probably spend about an hour going through every single one. But essentially, the takeaway here is that the suite of tools really help us get a deeper insight into your online activity. So, for an example, we can pull a report that shows exactly how long it's taking your particular brand, your exact brand that you're working on, to make a purchase after being exposed to an ad. So we can help fuel that journey. We can help tell you, okay, if you're not happy with the attribution window, come to us. We can pull this report and show you exactly how long your brand is taking to convert on Pinterest. Another solution we have for that more upper to mid funnel activity is a brand lift study. So we have brand lift studies available ranging from 2 questions right up to 6 questions. And with the brand lift study, we can show how your Pinterest activity has shifted consumer perception across a lot of different KPIs, such as brand awareness, ad recall, favorability, and purchase intent, just to name a few of them. And what I love about a brand lift study is that we can get insights that we can't otherwise get with standard media metrics. So, okay, great, we got a high view through rate, but do they remember my product? Are they thinking differently about my brand now? And with the brand lift study, we can answer those more strategic questions. It's also really important to call out that the results of a brand lift doesn't mean it's a pass or a fail. We take all those learnings that we get from a brand lift study, and then we can optimize the campaigns based off that baseline. And another great example of a brand using the brand lift study was B&Q, where they were able to show that by using idea ads alone, they were able to lift both awareness and consideration against the brand, regardless of the message communicated. And you can see here on the results, again, like we have such strong results for pin awareness lifted by the campaign over time. So again, we're able to provide those really deep insights to you or your brand. I'm going to hand over back over to Becky, who's just going to take us home for the final section around evolving your measurement study.
Thanks so much, Jen. Thank you. So this really leads nicely on from Jen's section. Views matter on Pinterest, as you've heard. They drive the lion's share of conversions to an advertiser. But also we can help advertisers understand the value of Pinterest by running channel overlap reports or switching to longer attribution windows, as already demonstrated. And we've just spoken to the value of implementing brand lift to measure brand influence. What we're suggesting is that then you evaluate this and evaluate the channel impact through MTA and bring this back into your measurement system of truth. So first off, let's look at the difference between MMM and MTA. The main goal of marketing mix modeling is to measure the marketing performance so you can use it to improve future marketing ROI and help reallocate your marketing budget across your tactics, products, segments, time, and markets for a better future return. So it's more holistic and enables you to compare results cross-platform. MTA is when you use different when different touch points are involved in a customer's journey, they get some credit for the same conversion event. And look, I appreciate we have thrown a lot of terminology and acronyms at you today, incrementality, attribution, and MMM. What we're recognizing is that all of them are important and have a part to play and work together in a system, but they offer different elements and they all have different pros and cons. They cover sort of different refresh frequencies, there's different volume of data in ingest. So for example, like MMM, you need 2 to 3 years worth of data, whereas MTA, less so. And also with attribution, you've got scenario planning, forecasting, much more short term. And you can do daily reporting refresh. So I think I did also see on the board where on some of the responses was the short termism. So it gives you immediate data. So it works in that respect. And MMM is not also a perfect science. It also has pros and cons. It's holistic. But what it gives in its holistic nature, it actually takes back in terms of the volume and the time, and then when it does feed back to you. So I know that obviously sometimes with MMM data, you're waiting a year back for results from campaigns from the year prior. And MTA is a solution for e-commerce, for example, that could provide shorter turnaround and less ingestion of data and really suit less mature brands that have less data aggregated over time. So as you heard up front early in Kim's journey, there's several points that actually with a last touch attribution approach, you would lose which channel was responsible. And that's why MTA matters, and it's important because it solves for that by looking at all impressions. And one such simple step to help you get ahead of the curve is to implement or work with a third-party provider to fill in these data gaps and deliver the measurement of clicks and impressions, so such as Phosphor that you'll hear from today and Rockerbox, who we also work with. Phosphor's model, for example, addressed the shortcoming of popular current methods by accounting for all the impressions and overcoming privacy challenges and offering an accurate and timely measurement solution. And it's also a lighter lift. And the results pay off. They pay off when you start looking at that full mountain range, if you think about my analogy before, and not just the peaks and troughs from one metric. Now, I know this all sounds, hey, look, change your measurement so that Pinterest looks great. But please don't just take my word for it. This is not commissioned by Pinterest, and this is the latest report from Phosphor, their e-commerce report, across clicks and view through. Phosphor look at clicks and view through rates equally. And their report found that challenger brands like Pinterest actually stand out when it comes to return on ad spend. And in fact, we rank higher than other digital platforms in their study. And that's because Phosphor unbiased their measurement. They measured return on ad spend over longer periods of time, more than just a couple of days, and beyond the click. And when they did, suddenly the picture changes dramatically. And there's a number of third-party solutions that we've mentioned that you can also work with, but they all range across coverage, implementation, and costs. So they're going to suit different advertisers depending on where they are in their journey, their brand maturity. But here's just a few to mention and where they sit in terms of the level of effort to implement and the path to purchase coverage. So a final step, so step 4, is measuring the incrementality of channels. And what's more important is to then incorporate this into models to influence the overall strategic decision. And the tests are great, both first party and third party, and we have our own first party solution. But if they're not put into effect, they don't really serve a purpose. So if they just sit there and you don't use them, i.e. you don't feed that back in or calibrate with your overall system of truth, you aren't really reviewing your old habits, as I spoke to before. So in order to fully understand the true nature, tests on incrementality, you have to measure that impact driven by channels and then feed that back in. And we know that this is so much, it's a lot, and it can be overwhelming. There's many steps in the process here, and it also depends on the maturity, as I've mentioned. But what we need to do is take that right step in the learning process and figure out, what that first step will be. So conversion and incrementality, just to sort of recap, I've already spoke at the beginning about attribution is not incrementality. And just to recap on incrementality studies, what they do is they help advertisers determine the incremental impact of their campaigns. So those sales that wouldn't have happened without the advertising, those 23 conversions that I mentioned at the beginning out of the 100. And they're through the use of randomized or matched controlled trials. And also you have the opportunity to do geo sales lift within that. But our first party solution is the Pinterest conversion lift. And as of course Jen mentioned, like PCA, you do need to have the tag installed, or better still, conversion API. But incrementality isn't always on, right? It's not like MTA. So what we're suggesting is that 1 time a year, you run an incrementality study across all platforms that you work with and feed this back into your attribution tests. And for site analytics, you can apply a multiplier for platforms when needed. And of course, this is going to differ by advertiser, and this is just an example, and by data ingest and time periods. But when you push this back in and apply a multiplier, you find that the Pinterest conversions adjusted are much more accurate. And to sort of, if you remember back to Jen's example, how much improvement we saw from the implementation of Conversion API, this is one way to get around it, is by applying a multiplier. Many of you also will be using marketing mix modeling, and I know from the survey that was coming up, some of you are using more than 3 sources of truth. So some of you in this room must be using marketing mix models already. And as we said on my table about the pros and cons, they're run infrequently. They need periodic checks to keep you most up to date with the data channel observations. But one way to start creating that system of truth is to leverage that incrementality. And the Harvard Business Review, a recent study, cited up to 25% improvement in MMM models that were calibrated or fine-tuned with this data. So to close out here are the 4 key steps that Jen and I have highlighted that can really take you on that evolution of your measurement journey. 1, increase your conversion visibility. 2, identify those gaps that you have. 3, uncover that path to purchase insight and look at the attribution and influence, widen those windows. And finally, look at incrementality and make sure you're feeding this back into your system of truth overall and calibrate and use these experiments that we're giving back to you. But, it's a challenge, as I've mentioned, and we know that measurement is this journey, and it's not a one-off effort. And as Jen emphasised, it's not pass or fail. It's test, learn, iterate, and we need to learn to crawl, walk before we can run. So first off, we're suggesting developing a baseline. Understand what success means, evaluate what your current performance looks like, and this could be based around looking at attribution windows, looking at your creative best practices. Are they optimized for the platforms that you're using? Looking at benchmarks, establishing those benchmarks, and your third-party analytics. Let's start there with the basics. And you know what? The baseline might not be that mind-blowing result, but it's a reflection of the current state. You have to start somewhere. Then let's move on to test and learn. So come up with execution strategies, work with measurement to test and define that methodology and what your success metrics are, and execute on that testing plan, build a learning agenda with us. And these are around solutions like sales lift, incrementality tests, brand lift. Let's establish playbooks, best practices for you and your brand, align on KPIs. But again, it's not pass or fail. Not all test ideas will be proven successes. It's about optimizing. So what can we do to improve that brand awareness result? What can we do to drive another incremental sale? Is it about frequency? Is it about using a different format, using a different objective? And then finally, continue to optimize and test. So apply those learnings from rigorous test and learn processes and continuously optimize, continuously use incrementality to feed back into your system. And this is where you'll have deep measurement engagement, hopefully with myself or another member of my team, incrementality using MMM, and then that data feeding in quarterly and annual planning. And then we go back, test and learn some more. So just to really summarize, signal loss at the beginning, as we've spoken about, is a reality. It's less than a year away, and unless it changes again, I feel like we keep saying it's a year away. But we need to be prepared for that data loss. And it sounds like some of you are, from the survey that we saw at the halfway through there, you're prepared, you're aware, but modelling is not going to fill that gap. It's not going to be the be-all and end-all. And basing on one source of truth, so for example, modelling that 5% off that 5% data and optimizing towards that one metric is not going to give you that full picture, that mountain range that I used as an analogy earlier. And finally, measurement is a journey. It's not a sprint, so we have to start somewhere. And again, just referring back to Atomic Habits, I don't know if any of you have actually read this, but he talks about that 1%, and actually Dave Brailsford as well with the British cycling team. What we want you today is, before leaving this room, just have a think about one thing that you can do to evaluate your source of truth, or even if it's just thinking about what you're using and what you can change, or could you book in a meeting, just write it down or commit it to memory, and connect with us. Changing that 1% now gets us on that path to building better habits for the future. Okay. Oh, I won't play that yet. But thank you so much. I mean, we are going to go to the panel now, but I don't know if you have any questions at all that you want to ask before we move on to the panel, and I pass on to Sophie to introduce everybody. Oh, quiet. Stunned silence. Brilliant. But thank you so much for listening, and hopefully you've got that one thing that you're going to change. You've got it in your memory, or you've written it down in your book. And I'm just going to pass on to Sophie to introduce the panel.
I'm obsessed with recently.
Yes.
And so much cool fashion inspiration, hair and makeup inspiration, nail inspiration, and then I'm making all these boards, and I was like, where have I been? Now I'm just addicted to Pinterest, and that's honestly where I found a lot of new inspiration
Yeah.
for a lot of different things.
I literally feel like we're the same person because I do the exact same thing because Pinterest is like positive. You know what I'm saying?
Right, there's no comments,
Yeah.
you can't see anything, you're just looking at pictures, and it's opened me up to a whole new world. I've made like a whole board for like home decor. Then it memorizes your algorithm, so then it's putting stuff that's exactly what you want to see.
Yes.
It's everything.
No, it's so like underrated. Like
Very.
it is the best.
In case Pinterest wants to sponsor me and Emma, we love you.
No, Pinterest is great.
Yeah.
I know we can collab on a board together.
We 100% should collab on a board.
I love it.
Throw whatever in there, fashion inspo, nail inspo.
Yes.
Let's do that.
So a glowing review there from Hailey Bieber, and we actually did not pay her or sponsor her in any way, believe it or not. I mean, she couldn't have nailed it more, frankly. So you've heard a lot this morning, and particularly in the second half, we talked a bit about that new Accenture research. I find that really fascinating, how there's such a disparity between preparedness for this new third-party cookie deprecation and new privacy changes future versus how prepared advertisers are feeling. We also talked a bit about conversion visibility, MTA versus MMM, and the various solutions that you can be leveraging to ensure that you're seeing better visibility. And so what we're going to do next is we're going to invite our panel up here, and they are going to bring many of the points that we've discussed into a bit of a kind of contextualization and hopefully kind of give everyone a bit of food for thought, which you can take away. So please welcome our panel, Laura, Irfan, Matt, and Jamie.
The seat on the end.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Hi, my name's Laura. I'm a lead client partner at Pinterest, and I look after all the technology clients here. I'd like these guys here to introduce themselves, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Irfan. I work at Media Hub. We're part of the Interpublic group. I look after all things data tech, platforms, and measurement. Just runs through all of those three things.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt. I'm Pinterest kind of head of home, so I look after a lot of home retailers, and I write for Ideal Home magazine.
And I'm Jamie, VP Growth at Phosphor. So Phosphor is a marketing measurement platform, as you've heard a few times throughout the talks. And I look after. I do some client work. I do marketing. So like you, I'm a marketer, and I work with our platform partners as well at Pinterest.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with Irfan. What are your thoughts on everything you've just heard? Does it resonate with you?
It does resonate. Becky, I thought your summary was brilliant, by the way. I really like this. Like, we're in this transitional point, I think, led by a trend which is data's become more open source, APIs are readily available. I think that system of truth is absolutely what it should be and where it should go. But I think the word system is what we should lean into, because if you look down on the system, you can see why certain things happen, like why clients are attracted to last click. A lot of what we see as a root cause of that with our clients is that they are incentivized. They're bonused every quarter on hitting a number, and they can't pull themselves away from disrupting the model. And in a lot of cases, it's the numbers are it's an unintended consequence. It's fabricated numbers, right? We all know some of the numbers are inflated, but that's how they're bonused, and it's really hard for an agency to try and change that. So in that system, it's about understanding, what are the clients motivated by, what are they incentivized by, and trying to change things at the root of that, rather than get frustrated, which we all do.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, do you find that challenge of clients being in a particular system something that you have to deal with?
Yeah, I think it can be really frustrating for all of us. Also, myself, kind of talking to retailers about making change in kind of measurement solutions and whatever else, and it does feel like sometimes you're up against a bit of a wall, and you're up against this kind of huge, great big problem that lots of people are involved in, and so actually making change is very, very difficult. I also find it quite frustrating, and the reason why I talk about the fact, like, why is there someone who writes in a magazine on the panel, is because actually what we write about are very much like future trends, right? So, and that really talks to the power that the platform has on Pinterest versus any other platform, that we can quite with authority talk about what people are doing and how they're engaging with brands well ahead before they even activate on that. So I talk about kind of what kitchens will look like in 6 months' time, right? That's quite a bold statement to be able to make. But on Pinterest, we do see those kind of early indicators. So when it comes down to measurement and talking to brands about how they become part of that decision-making set. So Sophie talked a little bit about this earlier, about that kind of 95% of the market that isn't in the market yet. That influencing those people to be in the 1, 2, or 3 brands that I'm going to buy a kitchen from starts so early. So we have to consider that. But ultimately, as you all know, like, this is a big challenge that many people, like, today we're not going to solve that immediately. The one advice I do give to clients, though, that we can, I think everyone here can kind of take away, is to look at things like API for conversions right now. It's something that you can do just to improve that kind of what you're seeing, and is that first step in kind of changing things.
I mean, Irfan, when it comes to advising your clients on how to measure for success, you know, as you said, it's not one size fits all. You know, what would be the first step you'd tell to a client to do?
There is one element which is one size fits all, and it's about infrastructure. You know, every client should have a data backbone, whether it's at the agency or it's in-house or it's a fusion of the two. So, and without that infrastructure, without clean data coming in, it's really hard to do any kind of modelling or to do anything really. So that's the one size fits all bit. The thing that enables that, going back to thinking about systems thinking, is having data engineers, software developers, clients, account teams, all talking the same language, and all feeding into this data backbone. I think it's very common for this data backbone to be built, and then whether it's account planners or clients kind of veer off and kind of do their own thing. They're like, well, I'll just do a conversion lift study over here, and it's not integrated into everything else. So that's the bit. The bit that is nuanced is category drivers, consumer behavior. Those all shift. But if you have that backbone in place, if you have infrastructure in place, those things as they change can in real time just move with your model. And I'll give you one example. At Media Hub, we built a tool called Next Best Decisioning. So it basically takes MMM models for the last 3 years, category data, media performance data. It irons out seasonality, and then it creates diminishing return curves for every possible channel you can think of, and then it informs you on where you should spend the next dollar. So we actually built that for Western Union, one of our clients. And during COVID, it was a massive disruptor to Western Union, because suddenly they had loads of people that would normally go into a high street to transfer money, couldn't do that anymore, so everyone went online. And so that kind of would traditionally knock all your models and all the seasonality. But because we had that in place, it was a really quick way for us to understand that change in behaviour. So I think if you have infrastructure, then any category drivers or consumer behaviour shifts you can kind of quickly adapt to.
I think the other thing, just touching on that, but to do with infrastructure and backbone as well, is buy-in. So making sure that you have people throughout the business, right? So like attribution or measurement is often thought of as a marketing thing, and it is in many ways. Like, it touches marketing most closely, But when we look at it at Phosphor, we think about it as a marketing thing, but we also think about it as a finance thing, as an executive thing, leadership thing. You need to get people across the business bought in, because otherwise what you end up with is a situation where your marketing team have the best measurement system in the world. They're using conversion lift studies to calibrate their MMMs and their MTA, and they can see that Pinterest is working really well and they want to invest in it. But then you have something like any external event, whether it's a black swan or just sort of a recession, and suddenly business leadership who are still using last click want to cut marketing spend, and then you end up with a problem. So I completely agree about the backbone, and I think it's about people as well as about data.
I mean, could you just let us just tell us a little bit more about what Phosphor do and how you kind of come into the discussions?
Yeah, sure. So I think actually Becky's summary on Phosphor was great. To go into a bit more detail on it, so we're a marketing measurement platform for specifically for e-commerce brands. We're very progressive with the way that we approach measurement. We're looking to, if those two problems that Becky and sort of I think running as a theme throughout the talk today were around access to data, so data availability and modeling. And we're looking to address both of those problems at the same time to really build out a more holistic measurement model. What that means is that we look at granular user level data where we can. So taking the MTA approach, we look at the clicks in the customer journey where they can be tracked, but we also accept that there's a massive fundamental and also like increasing limitation on what you're able to do with clicks. So we also layer in MMM modeling over the top. I think one way to think about Phosphor is like MTA with a daily MMM model running in the background as well. So what that lets us do is just build out like a really clear view of clicks, of impressions throughout the full funnel. So from a customer perspective, we're really doing two things. One is a diagnostic role. So it's basically giving you a CPA for every channel that you can directly compare apples and apples, right? So you've got a CPA for Pinterest that you can compare to your CPA for paid shopping or paid search. And then the second piece is propensity to scale. So that's a sort of forecasting. So now that you've got that, now that you know what your actual CPA for Pinterest is, what happens if you double your spend? What's that going to do to your CPA? Those are the sort of the types of questions that we're answering with customers.
I mean, you must have some real kind of gems of data and insight that you kind of get because you get access to so much data. What do you think most brands and retailers are kind of missing that you uncover from Phosphor?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think this is interesting, right? So we see a very clear playbook across, like, it's a super privileged position to have access to all of the customers that we've got. So we're modeling like hundreds of ad accounts, hundreds of millions of spend a quarter, all through Phosphor's model, and really clear themes come out of it. And this is where I think we have some. Are you all right? Do you want to? Yeah.
Just dying on stage.
So some marketers look at measurement as a burden, right? And there's something here where there's a negative versus a positive or progressive mindset. So if you're looking at measurement as a burden, it becomes something which is it's hard to achieve. It's frustrating. Whoever put last click is the devil, I want to buy you a drink. That's fantastic. That's perfect. And there's a sort of mindset shift that you can take if you're going to be really progressive about this stuff, where it's like actually measurement is an opportunity. So as marketers, what we're trying to do is differentiate, right? Like you want to be in a different space to your competitors. You want to be doing the things that they're not doing yet, doing them faster, doing them more. And measurement allows you to do that if you have good measurement, because so many people are using last click, so they're tied to the behaviors and the patterns that last click encourages and pushes you down. So the things that we see working really well at the moment it's two things really. It's platform diversification and it's funnel diversification. So if you're an advertiser spending over $100,000 a month on ads, we see scaling up to that level through a mix of conversion ads on Meta and Google being a pretty solid play. But once you get beyond that stage, the value in getting on platforms like Pinterest and the other challenges as well, right? So getting on Snapchat, getting on TikTok, and the value in pushing up the funnel and starting to run more higher funnel ads like awareness, like consideration, traffic ads, brand ads, is massive, and that's the stuff that increases your ability to scale. But it's also the opportunities that people are missing out on if they're just using last click measurement, or if they're just using a 7-day click, 1-day view model, or if any of these sort of bottom of funnel measurement approaches that are never going to capture the value of the full funnel approach.
I mean, Irfan, what's your kind of opinion on... sorry, literally. Forgive me. What's your view on last click attribution models?
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. I think we, probably about 3 years ago, we created this culture of diminishing return curves. And the language leads to action. So the more you talk about it, the more people start talking about it, the more it becomes a thing. And so when we're making decisions within client pods with clients, we talk about how those diminishing return curves are going to inform those decisions and the predictions that we make. So we have a dashboard that you log into client level, and you can see those diminishing return curves for every single channel. So at what point should you keep spending until there's no more incremental growth, right? And that's where you cut the tail. Or to Jamie's point, how much more could you spend? Where's the ceiling? And that helps. I mean, things like, most obvious things like brand search, right? You still see clients investing in PPC brand search when they're already in position 1 of organic and there's no other competitors bidding, right? And it's just a waste of money. We call that
30x return on ad spend in Google Ads, though.
What's that?
You got 30x return on ad spend in Google Ads when you're doing it. So.
And it's the Google tax, and that that's what it. And then you've got UAC, right? If you're running app activity, we see moderate to zero incrementality there. So it's a way of us just making better decisions. Like Performance Max was up on your chart, on the other end of the chart. I think Performance Max works better if you start like playing around with the components of it, and like just customizing it, and that rather than just pressing the proverbial optimization button. So yeah, the answer is a language of diminishing return curves, and everyone rallying around that.
Now, Matt, for the home sector, I know that, when I was looking to buy a sofa, I was searching for months before I made my decision. We saw earlier that the home sector, the clients have kind of some of the longest attribution windows. Is that something that your clients are taking into account?
Yeah, I think without trying to give a non-answer of every brand is different, because obviously you'll have people who are selling, I don't know, a side table or a side lamp or something like that maybe you don't have a longer kind of decision journey to make, versus a sofa, for example, or a kitchen. So everyone is different, but what we do find is that still, because of, as all of you pointed out, that you going to kind of GA last click and whatever else just seems to be this almost like default that we all sit in. That is the same for major home retailers who are selling things like a kitchen or a sofa or whatever else. And that's particularly challenging for myself to talk more about kind of Pinterest in that journey, even though there is a strong understanding of that. What they do though, and all the brands that are in a place where they're not able to move away from a 771, because that's how they measure across all platforms, what they are doing is expanding across the funnel. So rather than focusing just kind of lower funnel, which we see a lot of people kind of reactionary kind of doing now, is they'll run all 3 objectives on Pinterest, from awareness, consideration, and shopping. And this has had such an impact on their performance on Pinterest. I'll come on to talk to a few more, but there is a retailer who, since running always on full funnel activity on Pinterest, so taking into account the fact that buying a sofa, for example, will take time, and you're going to be looking around a lot of things to then actually, how do I size this up? Is this brand the right brand for me? Do I have the budget to buy from this brand? Whatever else. that journey is very, very long. They've started running always on full funnel, and since then Pinterest has become essentially one of their most effective channels, not just social, across everything, across outdoor TV, PPC, all of these, because they really understand that journey that home buyers and kind of home furnishing buyers sit in, which is great. Sadly, they're still, if you go right down to the bottom of it, still at this kind of last click attribution, but we're really demonstrating that journey by spreading across the funnel. So again, a suggestion to kind of anyone here who's kind of thinking about how do I impact, but I can't get my whole business or the client or whoever away from last click. Well, let's start expanding across that funnel to kind of really prove what we're doing.
Now, Jamie, is that kind of a challenge that resonates with you? Is that the kind of question that clients come to you most with?
Yeah, definitely, it's definitely one of them. And like one of the things that's interesting, just like tying together, I think like the 2 points that were just made, is the impact that full funnel advertising has on the sort of curve of diminishing returns that Irfan was talking about. Because one of the things that we see when we model that same curve at Phosphor is like, often in your first delivery of a diminishing returns curve, it will tell you that you don't have a lot of headroom in a certain channel. Some brands have the ability to scale, some brands don't. That's often not a marketing problem. It's a business problem. Like you need to go away and do other things first. But one of the things that we do see is that actually you can change the shape of your curve. So you can push out your point of diminishing returns. And one of the effective ways of doing that is to invest in full funnel media, right? So if you might have capped out conversion ads, but actually if you start running brand, if you start running traffic, if you start really just pushing up the funnel, then what you'll see over time is that you're able to then scale conversion more because you're able to invest more to capture and convert those audiences that you've just brought in. And that's something that you can do in a channel. So you can do it within Pinterest using like awareness, consideration, and conversion media. It's something that you can do cross-channel as well. So you can, we see Pinterest play a higher funnel role often than other channels. Like Meta's a beast for conversion. That's like they do that job better than anybody else from a scale perspective. But actually, what we see is that when you run your Pinterest ads, it changes the shape of your Meta CPA curve, because the more you spend in Pinterest, the more you're opening people up. And again, going back to that sort of consumer purchase cycle and the festival point that was up there earlier around Pinterest is the thing that you use before you go to the festival. If Pinterest is your sort of first touch channel, then warming people up on there means that you can then spend more on other channels later to convert them, and you just grow faster. So yeah, it is something common that we see.
I may actually just add another bit to that. So something we do see in home in terms of nuances between luxury home and kind of your kind of standard day to day is that actually in the luxury market on Pinterest actually versus other platforms, we do see such a bigger return on ad spend, because if we think about, and it's almost like thinking about buying a sofa or whatever else, right? It's a really considered purchase, and actually most luxury purchases are in most cases considered. So investing, again, what we're saying there in that upper funnel, like really building that kind of brand connection, does mean that luxury brands do drive much higher ROAS on Pinterest. Obviously, you're right, Meta is brilliant at driving conversions, but very much at scale. So if you're looking at high value, kind of almost like total customer value over a lifetime, they will be on Pinterest, and you're going to influence and win them by investing in that longer journey there.
And we see that in the data as well, right? So the best performing advertiser that we've got on Pinterest is Swoon, and they're the furniture brand. I don't actually know, Swoon might be in the room, but their results are massive on Pinterest, and it's because of that.
I mean, Matt, we saw earlier the success that B&Q had on Pinterest was very much brand lift study focused. Do you have clients using any other measurement solutions on Pinterest?
Yeah, we do. So a lot of the guys who are looking lower funnel, like some of the guys I've mentioned there from a luxury perspective or in paint or whatever else, they do take on more things like PCAs to really understand incrementality and whatever else. I think the B&Q case study is really brilliant, and I think if B&Q just in general is a very interesting business right now. if you look at a lot of what brands are doing in terms of how they're reacting to kind of the economic climate, and a lot of dollars have shifted lower down the funnel, we have reacted a bit to that. B&Q have developed a kind of a strategy where they are taking into account the economic situation that they're in, and they are putting in actions to mitigate that. But they still have one eye on the long term. And for them, changing brand perceptions is really, really important. Not that they have a mega kind of perception they need to change, but what they want to be known for in a year's time, in 2 years' time, starts right now. So many of us here, and I'm sure like client or agency or whoever, I'm sure you've got guys who are going, we need to get money in the business right now, and this is what we're going to do, right? And we're going to maybe default right back to Meta, and that's what we're going to do. Brands like B&Q will react that way, but they're just going, right, we need to secure today, but also next year and the year after. If we're not doing the work now with these high value customers, we're going to miss out, and this isn't a sustainable strategy. So for them, our kind of brand lift study measurement solution is really important, because everything they run this year, the client's key KPI is those brand lifts, which sometimes you hear and you kind of go, I'm sure, but what about click-through rates, and what about this, and what about that? But really for them, it was like, no, we have to be shifting these perceptions, because longer term, we need to secure the business for the future.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. Irfan, would you kind of say that these, how would you rate these additional tests for kind of getting a bigger picture for your clients?
Yeah, I mean, we look at it in... well, firstly, the omni-channel is the answer, and you're absolutely right, Jamie, that can influence your curves, and we should be more omni. And we're like, I'll hold my hand up. At Media Hub, our clients still look at the lower funnel and the upper funnel separately, because they're so short-termism. But yeah, the way we structure it, we have trials. So we go into a platform, we do an A/B test. If that trial is successful, it moves into a test, which is a match market experiment, so proper kind of experimentation. And then what all that feeds up to is what we call Brand Pulse, which is a brand tracker that we have, and we ultimately make correlations and connections throughout the year to bursts of activity, like pulling in those experiments. And I think what we're basically looking for is a predictor. Like, what is a predictor for brand and to drive cost per point lift, a low cost per point lift? One example I'll give you is back to our point around having a data backbone and infrastructure. We ingest attention data from Lumen and Adelaide. Lumen's an eye tracking company. T-Vision is a TV eye tracking company. Adelaide is an advanced attention provider. So that all goes into our data backbone. And at a property and a format level, we have an attention index. So rather than looking at impressions, which have no bearing if someone looked at an ad, we look at did people look at that ad? And for brand measurement, that's the best predictor we've found for success, because you're optimizing towards people that actually look at ads, which kind of makes sense. So yeah, I mean that's now what we kind of optimize to, and I think the point here is that the world's changed. You can ingest whatever data you can, and you can define your own media quality metrics. So our media quality metric is attention CPM. It's not CPM anymore. And what we've found is that there are pockets of good attention and pockets of bad. Like the pockets of bad is a feed, right? People power through the feed so quickly. And Gen Z, certainly a generation built on the feed, suffer from doom scrolling, right? Where there's a tendency to look for bad news fueled by some of the big tech algorithms. And I think the Health Journal came out and said that 44% of Gen Z that doom scroll suffer from moderate, severe mental health problems. During COVID, I was doom scrolling, looking for negative news around what's going on, and it definitely affected my mental state without a doubt. We've all been there. And what kind of condition do you think people are in when you're exposing advertising to them when they've got moderate to severe mental health? It's the wrong place to be running those ads. And also, it just so happens that feed delivers very low attention, right? So this helps us play in much richer pockets of inventory that drive value, and that's what informs how we deliver brands. And then there's a way for us to connect that to the lower funnel.
No, thank you so much for your time and your insight. I've certainly found it really valuable to hear your perceptions of the industry. I'm going to hand back to Sophie for some closing remarks.
Okay, thank you, Laura, and thank you to all our speakers as well for being with us and giving us your thoughts. I found that really interesting and insightful, particularly your last point, Irfan, about doom scrolling. We did touch on that a little bit in the first half, and it's something that we're really proud to be able to say that we encourage positivity, inspiration, and that study we touched on from the University of Berkeley about how we actually do help pinners with a higher capacity for positive emotion through being an inspiration platform. We're going to be sharing around the content from today. I appreciate we've gone through so much, but I really hope that everyone's found it informative. And, as Becky said, this whole process is, it's not a sprint. It happens over time. We appreciate that. We don't expect advertisers to be sort of suddenly and rapidly changing their approaches. But what we are here for is to kind of support and sort of offer, some of the resources that we went through already in terms of our measurement solutions. And also you can always, of course, speak to your account teams and our measurement teams as well. So that's everything from us. And please feel free to follow up with us afterwards via email or just outside, because we have a little bit of time. Thanks very much.